The Steam Deck has been my favorite console for 2 years in a row now. Full disclosure, Valve sent me my Steam Deck 2 days before the official release was at the end, which was at the end of February 2022. They also sent me the OLED Steam Deck about a week early as well, but I also got my own Steam Deck when they went up for pre-order because I didn't know that any of that was going to happen. That one ended up becoming my son's Steam Deck, and I took the one from Valve. I'm telling you this because I think it's important to be transparent with all of you. Yes, I got a free Steam Deck, but, well, hell, I got 2 of them. But I don't think that my opinion would change if Valve hadn't sent me a Steam Deck. If you have somehow ignored the deck for the last 2 years, it is essentially Valve's answer to the Nintendo Switch. It's the answer to the PS5. It's the answer to the Xbox. It's their answer to a lot of things, and it's maybe my favorite gaming system right now. And most of all, it isn't because of the upgrades that we got with the OLED deck. There's a lot of things that Valve has been doing in the background. But speaking of upgrades, let's upgrade to a message from our sponsor. I constantly have devices that need to be charged so that when I do get a moment to sit down and play a game, I don't have to wait around to top off that battery, and I don't have to be near an outlet. And almost all of them come with their own chargers, but you know what? I never ever use the chargers that come with these devices. Not my Steam Deck charger, not my Legion Go charger, not my ROG Ally charger. You know what I use instead? I use stuff from Ugreen. The Ugreen Nexode Pro 100 watt charger is a fast charger that provides 100 watts of dedicated charging power to a single port. In 60 minutes, you can charge a MacBook Pro 14-inch from 0 to 86%. Their new Nexode revolutionary tech, combined with the GaN Infinity chips, give the Pro 100 charger a size similar to the Nexode 65 watt while still fitting in the palm of your hand and without substitutes in quality or power. It has 2 USB-C ports and a USB-A port and can charge up to 3 devices at the same time. So if you need to charge your Steam Deck, your Miu Mini Plus, or any other number of devices, you can charge them all at once using just one plug. I'm a huge fan of Ugreen. If you try out their stuff, I guarantee you're going to be a fan too. So do me a favor and click on the link in the description down below that like button and pick up your Nexode Pro 100 watt charger today. There were a lot of really compelling systems that came out this year. I didn't get hands-on with all of them, but I've used the biggest ones like the ROG Ally, the Lenovo Legion Go, and the OneXFly. And while I think all of them have things that they do better than the Steam Deck, for me, the deck still takes the cake. So let's talk about why the Steam Deck is so damn good and get a little bit of history as well. But don't skip ahead if you already know the history. Sometimes I get stuff wrong, and if you stick around, you get to correct me, and that feels really good. So the Steam Deck launched in February of 2022. It was the follow-up to Valve's first attempt to break into the living room with Steam machines. These were an abject failure. In 2015, Valve announced that they were going to work with partners in order to make PCs for the living room running SteamOS, and Valve shipped the Steam controller to go along with them. Things did not go well. The Steam machines were too expensive, and SteamOS was using Linux, and very few games were made for Linux, so buying one of these meant that you were left out in the cold for most games that you wanted to play. I have an entire video about how Valve took the failure there and turned it into the success with the Steam Deck. I'll link to that down below at the end of this video. Fast forward to the Steam Deck launch in February of 2022, and everybody is talking about the deck. And throughout 2022, it cemented itself as one of my favorite systems of all time. But in 2023, the handheld scene was starting to get a lot more competition, starting with ASUS in June this year. They launched the ROG Ally, which does a few things way better than the Steam Deck. Number one, it has a fantastic screen. The colors just absolutely pop off of it, and it's got a 1080p resolution as well as up to 120 Hz frame rate. And if that wasn't impressive enough, it also had a variable refresh rate, so your games just felt smoother on the Ally than they did on the Steam Deck. In addition to that, the Ally was running just plain old Windows, and that means that games that were incompatible with Proton would work on the Ally no problem. It was pretty much the perfect portable Game Pass machine, which was cemented by the fact that it included 3 months of Game Pass when you bought it. The Ally is also more powerful than the Steam Deck thanks to the Ryzen Z1 Extreme chip, so it's able to maintain higher frame rates for most games than the Steam Deck can pull off. But that being said, it wasn't nearly as efficient as the Steam Deck in lower TDP environments. The Steam Deck can hit the same performance levels while sipping the battery rather than chugging it. I feel like the Ally is for people who want to have a smaller form factor with access to Windows-only games that won't run on Proton, and even then, you can't stray too far from a power outlet. Of course, it also has fast charging, which kind of makes up for the poor battery life, but I think there's a lot of people that were looking for a handheld PC and they didn't want to deal with Linux, and for them, the ROG Ally seemed like a perfect choice. I will say that personally, I never had any issues with the battery life of the ROG Ally, but I also don't have nearly as much time to sit down and play games in a long period as I'd like. But the Ally also had some serious problems. Right before launch, or was it after? Whatever. Right around launch, there was some really inflammatory stuff that came out about ASUS not doing a good job supporting their hardware. And a bunch of YouTube videos pointed the finger at ASUS, saying that they were bad. This, combined with the fact that the ROG Ally was kind of cooking some SD cards, made a lot of people hesitant to pick up the system, and there were reports of many people returning them to Best Buy. I will say that I take the return reports with a grain of salt, but I personally know multiple people that ran into SD card issues on their ROG Ally. And not to pile on, but the Ally is a Windows machine, and while a lot of people think that that is a positive from a compatibility perspective, I personally think that it's a negative from a usability perspective. Windows just isn't designed very well in order to run on a 7-inch touchscreen, which is why ASUS ships the ROG Ally with Armoury Crate, which is essentially a launcher and settings interface to try and help people get around the terrible UI that is touch Windows. All of these problems with the ROG Ally could not have come at a worse time for ASUS, because in August, just 2 months later, there was a leak about the Lenovo Legion Go, a system with essentially the same internals as the ROG Ally, but with a larger screen, detachable controllers, and none of the baggage that comes from being shipped by a company called ASUS. We've already established that the ROG Ally is more powerful and less efficient than the Steam Deck, but the Legion Go combats this by shipping it with a larger battery and slightly faster RAM than both the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally, coming in at, I think, 48 watt-hours. Its screen is 8.8 inches, which is just crazy, and it has these absolutely bananas controllers that you can detach and turn into a mouse and keyboard alternative. On top of that, the big screen makes navigating Windows so much better than on the ROG Ally, and for my money, the Legion Go is the go-to system if you absolutely must run Windows. In fact, it works so well using those 8.8 inches of screen real estate that Lenovo's equivalent to Armoury Crate, which is called Legion Space, feels almost like it's completely unnecessary, which is a very good thing because it's pretty bad. At roughly the same time, the one notebook released the OneXFly, a handheld PC with a 7840U chipset and a 7-inch screen. It's a good deal smaller than the ROG Ally, but it feels heavier. I know that it's actually lighter, but it's just that it's so much more dense that it kind of does a trick on my brain. One thing I love about it is that it has 2 USB-C ports and a USB-A port, which made using my cheap wireless keyboard that I had laying around very easy to use with it. The face buttons are great, the joysticks are Hall effect. Combine that with the fact that it's got a 120 hertz screen and it has customizable LEDs on the handle, and it seems pretty compelling. And it's strangely compelling that it is pretty powerful in a small form factor and decent hardware, that is, until you get it in your hands. I have to say that of all of these devices, this one is my least favorite. It has all the issues that the ROG Ally has and that I don't like, plus it's missing the back paddles. I don't really like the grips, and its command center feels sluggish and kind of annoying. It has a dedicated keyboard button, which is nice, but for some reason, by default, it brings up Windows old touchscreen keyboard instead of the new one, which is a big hunk of junk compared to the new one. All of these issues combined with the fact that it costs over $1,000 unless you picked it up on early bird pricing make this one a really tough sell. But compared to the giant companies like ASUS and Lenovo, I can totally understand why they can't match those prices. They also don't have the Steam store essentially to subsidize their pricing. But all of these things that I'm saying that's bad about all of those other devices, I don't really think it's fair of me to point out all of those negatives when it comes to the Steam Deck's competition without pointing out the things that the Steam Deck, the issues that the Steam Deck has on its own, which I'll get to in a second. I also think I have to point out that both ASUS and Lenovo have already been working on improving the experience of using their handheld PCs. And the day one experience of using those devices compared to what it's like now is night and day. Both companies are doing very well to improve their devices over time, and I really appreciate that. Okay, let's talk about the issues that I've had with the Steam Deck. Number one, the screen. The LCD screen in the Steam Deck is very washed out when you compare it to just about any other screen out there, even the really cheap ones. So much so that plugin makers created Vibrant Deck, which is a plugin to let you adjust the saturation of your screen to try and make the colors pop just a little bit more. It was such a big improvement that when Valve updated the deck to SteamOS 3.5, they included a way for you to adjust not only the saturation, but the color temperature as well, so you can get your games looking exactly the way that you want them. It still doesn't make the screen better. It's less of a real fix and more of a band-aid. Next up, the Steam Deck runs Linux, and that means there are lots of games that simply won't work on the Steam Deck. Epic Games even said they don't see themselves supporting the deck until it has tens of millions of users, which is a tall order because handheld PCs are a very niche device, and Epic Games are not the only publisher that won't support the deck. In fact, Bungie said if they found people playing Destiny 2 on the Steam Deck, they would permaban those accounts because they were circumventing anti-cheat software. But even if you just want to play single-player games, you're also out of luck when it comes to being a Game Pass subscriber. I have said it on this channel 100 times. Game Pass is the best deal in gaming right now. And if you want to play those games on the Steam Deck, your only option is to stream them or install Windows on the Steam Deck, which is a really bad experience. And for most people, streaming's not really a good option either because of the quality of their home network. One thing that both the Ally and the Legion Go have over the Steam Deck is that it doesn't have the ability to use an external GPU. The Ally can do this, but unfortunately it uses a proprietary connector, and the GPUs that support that proprietary connector are prohibitively expensive, but still you have that as an option. The Legion Go supports Thunderbolt and has 2 USB-C ports, so you can hook it up to something you already have, and it's going to perform very well. But the deck doesn't have access to external GPUs because it doesn't have a Thunderbolt 4 port, meaning when you hook it up to a big screen using either a dock from Valve or a third party, links below, you would be limited in resolutions. It certainly isn't a deal breaker, but it is definitely a disappointment. That's far from all the issues that people have had with the Steam Deck since it came out in 2022, but we don't have all day here. So throughout 2023, in the background, Valve has been quietly working on something new. Through the releases of the ROG Ally and the Legion Go, Valve was listening to everyone's gripes and complaints about the Steam Deck and working on addressing all of them. In November, Valve shocked everyone with the release of the OLED Steam Deck. They addressed so many issues with the new version, but they totally underplayed it so much. They basically just said, hey, we got an OLED screen, it's pretty cool. But not only did they replace the screen with the OLED screen, which was actually bigger by half an inch than the LED deck, they did so without making the Steam Deck any bigger, but just by shrinking the bezels. They changed so many of the internals, improving the trackpads, the polling rate of the screen, as well as the polling rate of the trackpads. They've improved the touch experience a lot. The joystick cap's shape was improved, the bumpers and internals were completely replaced, and the fact that they used a thinner OLED screen gave them more room for a larger battery. And when you combine that with a more efficient APU and faster RAM, that means that the Steam Deck now has the best battery life out of any of the big handhelds out there. And I'm here to tell you, it isn't even close. And if there's one thing that is more important on a handheld system than anything else, it's got to be battery life. There are a bunch of other improvements that the OLED deck made over the LCD deck, but if Valve hadn't even released the OLED deck, all the improvements that they've made to SteamOS over the last year, man, the software, it just makes the deck miles ahead of the competition, at least for me. I'm not saying that the deck is better, but it is better for me. If you need a Windows machine for whatever reason, I personally think that the right move is not to get a Steam Deck and install Windows on it. I think you should pick up a Lenovo Legion Go. You don't have to worry about the SD card issues with the Ally. That makes me nervous to recommend it. And the Ally's or the Legion Go's larger screen makes using Windows infinitely easier. And even if you're not interested in the detachable mouse, that one's hard to say, it's always an option in case you change your mind later. It is definitely heavier than the ROG Ally, but it's really comfortable to use. But if you want a more console-like experience, I think that the deck is the right move. There's certainly room for the deck to improve, but Valve has shown all throughout the year and last year that they listen to feedback and iterate on it quickly. I think that right now is a great time to pick up a Steam Deck or any other PC handheld because I think it's going to be a few years before we see something with significant performance upgrades. But if I have to pick just one, it's going to be the Steam Deck every single time. But what do you all think? What is your favorite hardware that came out this year? Let me know in the comment section down below that like button. And if you enjoyed this video, you're probably going to enjoy this one right here. From the Nerd Nest, I'm Bill. Stay rad, everybody.